She was 19 years old, a sophomore at the University of South Florida. It was 1997, no cell phones tracking her every move, no social media documenting her life. Just a girl with a jealous streak that nobody could stop and a boyfriend she refused to let go. On March 14, 1997, in an apartment in St. Petersburg, Florida, that obsession turned fatal. By the time he was found that morning, it was too late. And by the time she was arrested 3 days later, the question wasn't whether she did it. The question was, how far would jealousy push someone to go? This is the story of Miranda and Devon, and it's not the love story you think it is. Welcome to the Justice Minute. New subscriber, where are you watching from right now? Drop your location in the comments. I read every single one. Today's story happened over 25 years ago, but it's still one of the most intense cases I've covered, so stick with me. To understand how we get to March 14, 1997, we have to go back to where it all started. Miranda Collins grew up in Tampa during the 1980s. Her parents described her as a bright kid, good grades, extroverted, the kind of girl who made friends easily. In the pre-internet world, that meant she was always out, always social, always at someone's house or at the mall or at the beach. Nothing unusual, nothing that suggested what was coming. In the fall of 1995, she was 18 years old when she enrolled at the University of South Florida in Tampa. Business administration major. She moved into dorms, joined a sorority, did what thousands of college freshmen do, tried to figure out who she was away from home for the first time. That's when she met Devon Harris. Devon was 21, a junior, already a year into college when Miranda showed up. From what we know about him, from friends, from yearbook photos, from later court documents, he seemed like a typical college guy of the mid-90s. He worked part-time at a circuit city in the Carrollwood area, selling electronics and computers. He had a friend group. He played video games. This was the era of Super Nintendo and early PlayStation. He had a decent relationship with his family. There was nothing about Devon that screamed red flag. But here's where the story gets important. Within a month of meeting each other, they moved in together. Now I know what you're thinking, that's fast. And you're right, it's fast. But it happens in college, especially when two people feel like they've found something real. This was 1995. Social media didn't exist. You met someone, you clicked, and you moved in. That was just how it worked. For the first 6 months, by all accounts, they were a normal couple. Then together, then apart, then back together. They fought sometimes. Every couple does. But friends who knew both of them said there was an intensity to their relationship that didn't feel quite right. An imbalance. Miranda was obsessed with Devon. And I don't mean I love my boyfriend obsessed. I mean she monitored everything he did. She went through his belongings, she asked him constantly where he was going, who he was seeing, what he was doing. She demanded complete transparency. She wanted to know about every girl he'd ever looked at or talked to. And she got angry, really angry, whenever he spent time with friends without her. One friend later described witnessing an incident where Devon was talking to another girl at a party, just a casual conversation, and Miranda literally pulled him away and told him to stay away from her. The girl was his cousin's girlfriend. It was just normal social interaction, but Miranda saw it as a threat. By early 1997, about 18 months into their relationship, their friends were genuinely concerned. The relationship had become suffocating. But Devon wasn't trying to leave. Some people theorized he was afraid to leave. Others thought he was just going along with it, hoping it would pass. One friend said Devon seemed almost resigned to it, like he'd accepted that this was just who Miranda was. What we do know is that by February 1997, 1 month before his death, Devon was confiding in friends about his relationship. He was unhappy. He was feeling trapped. He wanted out. But he hadn't told Miranda. He was afraid to tell her. This is the part where everything could have been different. If he'd left, if he'd had that conversation, if someone had intervened earlier. But he didn't. So if you're in a relationship where you're feeling monitored or controlled or like you can't breathe, whether you're the one doing it or the one experiencing it, drop a comment. Say red flag. I want to know if this resonates with you. This could be someone you know, and sometimes just saying it out loud is the first step toward getting help. March 1997. The 90s were in full swing. Titanic had just hit theaters. The internet was still new. Most people had dial-up if they had anything at all. Cell phones existed, but they were rare, expensive, and mostly for professionals. What that meant for this story is crucial. There was no text messaging, no email trail, no location tracking. Just people, their words, and what they could remember. The end of their relationship started not with a bang, but with a rumor. Devon had apparently been in contact with an ex-girlfriend. Nothing inappropriate from what we can tell from later witness testimony. They'd just run into each other somewhere and exchanged numbers, agreed to catch up. But Miranda found out, and she didn't just get mad, she exploded. The fights in the final week before March 14th were volatile. Neighbors later reported hearing screaming coming from the apartment they shared, a small one-bedroom in St. Petersburg, about 20 minutes south of Tampa. The neighbors couldn't make out specific words, but they described the yelling as intense and one-sided. Mostly Miranda's voice, mostly angry. On March 12th, 2 days before he died, Devon called his mom. He told her he was thinking about ending things with Miranda. He said he couldn't do it anymore. He felt like he couldn't breathe. He asked his mother for advice. She urged him to break up with Miranda, to do it soon and to maybe bring a friend with him when he did it. She was worried about how Miranda would react. Devon's mother later said she'd never heard her son sound so unhappy, so desperate to leave. He told her he'd do it that week. He never got the chance. On March 13th was a Friday. Devon was supposed to go to a friend's house that night, a friend named Marcus. Marcus had invited him to come over, watch the game on TV, drink some beers, just get out of the apartment for a while. This was before everyone had cable with 100 channels. You picked nights to go watch specific games at friends' houses. Devon accepted. He needed to get away from Miranda. But then something changed. At around 8:15 p.m., Devon called Marcus. There were no cell phones, so this was a landline call from the apartment. He said he couldn't make it. He said Miranda didn't want him to go. He said they were working things out and he needed to stay home. Marcus tried to talk him into it over the phone. He told Devon to come anyway, but Devon declined. He said he'd try another time. That was the last conversation Devon had with a friend outside his apartment. What happened next, we only know through what Miranda later told police, because no one else was there to witness it. According to her statement, she and Devon had another fight that night. She said he was distant. She said he was pulling away emotionally. She said she confronted him about the ex-girlfriend. They argued. And then, here's where it gets critical, she claims Devon threatened to leave her. He was going to break up with her. And something in Miranda snapped. She says she doesn't remember exactly what happened next. She says they struggled. She says things escalated. But the evidence tells a different story. In the kitchen of their apartment there was a knife, an 8-inch serrated blade, the kind you'd find in any kitchen drawer, except this one had a specific purpose that night. Miranda stabbed Devon Harris 37 times. 37. The medical examiner would later determine that at least 15 of those wounds were delivered after he was already dead, after he was already on the floor, already bleeding out, already past the point of no return. She didn't stop when he stopped fighting. She kept going. The wounds were concentrated on his chest, his torso, his arms, the kind of attack that suggests rage, panic, and complete loss of control all at once. After the knife came down for the last time, Devon Harris was dead on the floor of his bedroom, and Miranda Collins was covered in his blood. This is the moment where most people either call 911 or they panic completely. There's rarely a middle ground, and Miranda did panic, but she didn't call for help. She made a choice that would eventually lead to her conviction. She cleaned up. For the next 3 to 4 hours, she cleaned that apartment. Blood from the bedroom. Blood from the kitchen where she'd gotten the knife. Blood from anywhere else it might have splattered. She washed her hands. She washed her clothes. She changed into clean clothes. She tried to erase what she'd done. In 1997, before DNA technology was as refined as it is today, before forensic science had advanced the way it has now, cleaning up after a crime actually had a better chance of working. But not this cleaning. Not this badly. By around midnight, the apartment was cleaner. Not spotless. Forensic evidence was still there, but cleaner. And then she did something that, in hindsight, seems almost absurd. She went to sleep. She actually got into bed and went to sleep next to her boyfriend's body. His body was in the next room, bleeding out on the floor, and she went to sleep. The next morning, March 14th, 1997, she woke up, and reality hit. What she'd done was still true. Devon wasn't coming back. The body was still there. So she did what she thought would be her second best option. She called a friend. She called a girl named Jessica, someone she knew from college, and here's what she told her over the phone. "I think I did something really bad. Can you come over?" Jessica arrived at the apartment around 9 a.m. When Miranda opened the door, Jessica knew immediately something was catastrophically wrong. Miranda's eyes were red. She was shaking. She was barely able to speak. Jessica asked her what happened, and Miranda told her. She told her about the knife. She told her about Devon. She told her about the fight. She told her that Devon was dead on the bedroom floor. Jessica's reaction was immediate. She used the apartment's landline to call 911, and while they waited for the police to arrive, she told Miranda to wash her hands and sit down. The police arrived at 9:47 a.m. on March 14th, 1997. When they entered the apartment, they found Devon Harris on the bedroom floor. He'd been dead for approximately 12 to 13 hours. The body was in rigor mortis. The amount of blood confirmed the violence of the attack. This wasn't a 1 or 2 stab crime of passion. This was overkill. This was rage. Miranda was arrested at the scene. She was read her Miranda rights, and yes, that's actually where her first name comes from. Her parents named her after the Supreme Court case, which is just dark enough to be almost symbolic. What happened next was the interrogation. The St. Petersburg Police Department brought her into the station. She was booked into the Pinellas County Jail, and she immediately asked for a lawyer, which was smart, which was exactly what she should have done. Except she also decided to talk to the detectives without her lawyer present. This was before lawyers on TV had advised everyone to just say nothing. This was before people understood the legal system the way they do now. Miranda was terrified, young, and confused. The detectives knew how to work with that. During that interrogation, which lasted approximately 6 hours, Miranda confessed to everything. She told them about the jealousy. She told them about monitoring Devon's movements. She told them about the final fight. She told them that Devon was going to leave her. She told them she couldn't stand it. She told them that when he said he was leaving, something in her just broke. She said, "I couldn't let him leave. I couldn't live without him." And when asked why she stabbed him 37 times, she said she didn't remember doing it. She said it was a blur. She said her whole body just reacted. The detective asked her, "You don't remember stabbing him 37 times?" And she said no. That confession, despite the later defense team's arguments that it was coerced or that she was emotionally unstable, would become the foundation of the prosecution's case. Okay, so here's where most people stop watching. They think they know where this ends. Girl kills boyfriend. Girl gets caught. Girl goes to prison. End of story. But it's not. Because what comes next? The trial, the psychological evaluation, what the jury actually decided. It's more complicated than that, and it matters. If you're watching this, I want you to keep watching because the ending isn't what you expect. So don't go anywhere, just promise me you'll keep watching. While Miranda sat in the Pinellas County Jail waiting for her trial, the forensic evidence was still being processed, and the evidence was damning. First, there was the knife. It was found in the kitchen sink, still in the apartment. The fingerprints on it matched Miranda's. The blood on it was Devon's. There was no ambiguity there. Second, there was the blood evidence. The forensic team found her blood, and his blood mixed together in the kitchen area, which confirmed the struggle. But they also found extensive blood splatter patterns in the bedroom that were consistent with the stabbing. And importantly, they found blood on Miranda's clothes, under her fingernails, and in her hair. She had tried to clean up, but forensic evidence doesn't lie. In 1997, DNA testing was still relatively new, but they had enough blood evidence to prove beyond any doubt that this was where the crime happened. The patterns alone told the story of the attack. Third, there was timeline evidence. The medical examiner's report put his time of death between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m. on March 13th and 14th. That aligned with Miranda's own confession about when the fight happened and when she'd stabbed him. There were no Devon's death. It lasted 5 days. The prosecution presented their case, the physical evidence, the confession, the motive, the timeline. They called the medical examiner, who described the 37 stab wounds in graphic detail. They called the detective who conducted the confession. They called friends of Devon who testified about his unhappiness in the relationship and his desperate desire to leave. The prosecution also presented photographs, Polaroids taken at the crime scene. This was before digital photography. These images were printed, physical evidence, and they were brutal. Blood, a body, the reality of what Miranda had done. The defense presented their case, the psychological evaluation, the evidence of Miranda's mental illness, the argument that this was a person in crisis, not a calculated murderer. They presented testimony from the forensic psychologist about BPD and trauma responses. They called a friend of Miranda's who testified about her anxiety and her intense fear of abandonment. Miranda took the stand in her own defense. And this is where it got emotional. She testified about her childhood. She talked about her parents' divorce when she was young. She talked about the fear she'd felt that day, the absolute terror of her father leaving. She talked about abandonment issues that went back decades. She talked about her feelings for Devon, how real they were, how desperate her need for him was, how she couldn't imagine a world without him. She cried. She explained her version of events, how she lost time during the attack, how she didn't remember stabbing him repeatedly, how she woke up from the violence like coming out of a fugue state. The prosecution's cross-examination was brutal. They asked her pointed questions about her confession. They asked her about specific moments of the attack. They asked her why, if she didn't remember the violence, she remembered to clean up afterward. They asked her why she went to sleep next to his body. How do you forget committing a crime while still having the presence of mind to cover it up? On November 15th, 1997, after deliberating for 6 hours, the jury reached their verdict. They found Miranda Collins guilty of second-degree murder, not first-degree, not manslaughter, second-degree murder, defined in Florida as an unlawful killing with a depraved heart, without premeditation or deliberation, but with malice aforethought. The jury had rejected the defense's mental illness argument. They decided that regardless of her mental state, the violence of the attack, 37 stab wounds, 15 after he was already dead, constituted malice. On December 10, 1997, Miranda Collins was sentenced. She received 25 years in prison. 25 years. She was 19 when she killed Devon. She'll be 44 when she gets out, if she ever gets out. She's eligible for parole after 20 years, but there's no guarantee the parole board will grant it. So here's the thing about this case that I can't stop thinking about. What if someone had intervened earlier? What if Devon had left when he wanted to leave? What if someone had recognized the warning signs of Miranda's mental illness and gotten her help? What if one decision had been different? Because this isn't just a story about jealousy. It's a story about how quickly love can turn into obsession, how obsession can turn into control, how control can turn into violence. If you or someone you know is in a relationship where you're being monitored or controlled or isolated, please reach out. The National Domestic Violence Hotline is 1-800-799-7233. That's available 24 hours a day. And if you're struggling with intense feelings of abandonment or rage, there is help. Please seek it out, because this story doesn't have to be your story. Devon Harris was buried in Tampa in March 1997. His family requested privacy. They didn't do interviews. They didn't seek attention. They just tried to grieve in peace. This was before true crime podcasts, before the internet sensationalized every case, before his death would be endlessly discussed online. It was just a murder, a family in grief, and a community trying to understand how this could happen. Devon's mother later wrote a statement to the court that was included in the sentencing documents. She described him as a good son, a good person. She said she still didn't understand how a person he'd loved could take him from her so violently. She wrote, "I will never get to see my son graduate. I will never see him get married. I will never meet my grandchildren. And Devon's younger sister will grow up without her big brother. This is what jealousy took from us. This is what one person's inability to accept rejection took from us." Devon's father didn't make a statement, but according to friends and family who spoke to police, he struggled deeply with his son's death. Blame, guilt, grief, all of it mixed together. He lived for another 18 years but never fully recovered from losing his son. Miranda Collins is currently incarcerated at the Lowell Correctional Institution in Ocala, Florida, one of the largest women's prisons in the state. She's been there since 1997, more than 25 years now. According to her inmate record, she's had no disciplinary issues. She participates in mental health counseling and prison work programs. She's reportedly quiet, kept to herself, remorseful. Whether she's genuinely remorseful or whether it's an act of self-preservation is something I can't answer. But what I can tell you is that she spent the prime years of her life in prison. The years where she should have been finishing college, finding a career, maybe falling in real love with someone who deserved her, or getting the help she desperately needed. Instead, she spent a quarter century in a cell. And Devon won't spend any more years anywhere. This is the cost of jealousy in its most extreme form. This is what happens when love becomes suffocation. When devotion becomes control. When someone decides that if they can't have you, nobody can. Now there's a forensic question that comes up a lot in this case. Some people have argued that Miranda's mental illness, her borderline personality disorder, should have resulted in a lesser sentence or treatment-focused incarceration. Some people have argued that she's a victim of her own brain chemistry, that the system failed her by not intervening earlier. Others argue that she murdered her boyfriend, that mental illness is no excuse for violence, that she knew exactly what she was doing when she grabbed that knife, that she deserves to be punished. The truth is, probably somewhere in the middle. Mental illness is real. It can be devastating, but it doesn't erase responsibility. It doesn't make murder okay, and it doesn't undo the death of someone who, by all accounts, just wanted to leave a relationship. Devon Harris was a real person. He had dreams, he had family, he had friends, and he was murdered because he wanted out of a relationship. That's the part I can't get past. Not the mental illness, not the tragedy of Miranda's broken mind, but the simple, devastating fact that a young man is dead because someone couldn't accept being left. And there's a lesson in that. For anyone watching who's ever felt that kind of desperate fear of losing someone, that kind of intense all-consuming jealousy, that kind of need where another person becomes your entire world, you have to let people go. That's the hardest part of love. Knowing that the person you love could leave, and accepting that they might. Because if you don't, if you hold on so tight that they can't breathe, this is what happens. This is what we're left with. An empty courtroom, a dead man, a woman in prison, and 2 families destroyed forever. 25 years has passed since that morning in St. Petersburg. The city has changed. Technology has transformed. But the lesson hasn't. The reminder is still there. Jealousy, left unchecked, is a weapon, and sometimes it's fatal. If you made it this far, thank you. This story is hard, it's dark. It's the kind of story that sits with you. And I want to know what you're thinking. Do you think Miranda deserves the sentence she got? Do you think her mental illness should have changed the outcome? Do you have someone in your life right now who reminds you of one of these characters? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Subscribe if you haven't already. And if this story resonated with you, if you know someone who's struggling with obsession or jealousy or abandonment fears, please share this video with them. Sometimes the best intervention is just knowing that someone sees you, that someone understands. I'll see you in the next one.